Hello and welcome back to Bagua Complete Basics. This is lesson 3. I'm Eli Montaigue, head of the WTBA. In this lesson we're going to be adding the hands into circular walking. So the previous lesson we covered everything that the lower body does as we walk the circle. All the compressions, the hip turns, the grounding, where the weight should be and so on. Now we've got to put the hands in. So you've done the groundwork. That's the more difficult part. If you've got that working quite nicely, now you're comfortably ready to put the hands in. All the hands on a basic level. Remember, we're only covering basics. Some other things do happen at a later stage in your training, but just for very basics, when you're learning from a beginner's perspective, all the hands really do is just hold their center line. So you have to learn to hold the correct structure in the arms, of course. But what the upper body does is it locks into the center of the circle. So as you can see there, I've got a small black circle here in the center of the circle. So I've got my circumference going around and my center. So when I walk the circle, my right or my long arm, depending which way I'm going, that hand is over the top of the circle. See? You can do it on a larger circle if you happen to have a larger circle somewhere, I don't know, basketball ring or something, and you've got a little circle painted somewhere or something like that. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit larger. This is the ideal size, where the palm is roughly, if I stand on the circle like that and go like that, my wrist should be roughly over that center of the circle. So the circle, of course, is about twice that. As you get much more advanced in your training, the circle can become smaller, or as I say, it doesn't matter so much if you use a slightly larger circle when you're learning, but this is the ideal size. So we hold the body into the center, like so. The main concept of adding the hands in is to further generate torque and waist power through here. Because of the fact, although we're not doing anything physically with the upper body, as far as movement I mean, we're just holding a static pose. So we're just literally holding this position. But by holding that position and then having to do our walking underneath, it makes it that much more difficult. Because what will tend to happen is, as you try to turn your hips to do the walking underneath, you'll find the upper portion of your body moving as well. So we have to try to limit that as much as possible. So the hands lock onto that center, and as I step through, you see, I don't move off that center. As I step through again, see, this is happening underneath, getting your compressions, all the stuff we learned in lesson 2. But the upper body locks onto that center, like so. This has the effect of building muscular development around the waist. Because now, we're not holding the hands like this, remember, we're turning the body. So the waist from here is turned in. So notice how, if I do it to the front, my hips now are facing to the camera, see? Now, this is incorrect. This is correct. See how I'm twisting my upper body? It's not just my shoulders from the top. It's right from down here. Here's my belly button. There, like so. My center, my pelvis and hips facing directly to the camera. Okay, here's my belly button. So this would be incorrect. See, that's just here. Just my shoulders twisting, my belly button's still to the front. What I want to do is hold the hips. Now my belly button's here. Okay? So you're spiraling up through the body. So this moves a little bit, this moves a little bit more, this moves a little bit more, and this moves a little bit more. So everything spirals up until, of course, you can't move solely from here. It's not like just 2 fixed points that are turning. It's several points that turn up through the body. So when we talk about these spirals going up through the body, we may do, for example, the hips may turn in a little bit, then here will turn a little bit more, here will turn a little bit more, here, 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 and all the way up through the body until you get a full spiral happening. What we don't want is just something like that. Then we've just got a turn at the bottom and a turn at the top, and no spiral coming up through the body. So let's have a look from scratch what the hands are doing, just the basic shapes of the palms, and then we'll have a look at how we add it into the actual circle walking. So the shape of the hands is exactly as we did in lesson 1 for the Qigongs. So there were 8 different palms in the Qigongs. The circle walking itself, of course, when done very slowly, is its own Qigong. It's a moving Qigong, but you're literally holding the Qigong position whilst doing a movement with the legs. So you can actually do it as a very slow movement as a Qigong, just like when we were just holding the static Qigongs, and so on. When you do it faster, of course, it becomes a more martial feeling practice. So, we've already learnt the palms, the different palm positions. All you have to do is take those palm positions. Classically, we usually use the number 3 hand. Remember, number 3 hand was fire, like so, that we learnt already. So, this is the most common Bagua position for walking the circle. However, you can walk the circle with all the 8 palms. In fact, you can walk the circle with all 64 palms, meaning you can walk the circle with number 1 hand, number 2 hand, number 3 hand, and so on, up to 8. But then you can also walk the circle with a number 1 hand here and a number 2 hand here, or a number 1 hand here and a number 2 hand here. So if you add them all up, you get 64 different changes. Because you have obviously 1 palm, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So you can have palm 1 here with all the 8 different palms in my right hand, or I can have number 1 palm here with all the 8 different palms in the front hand, and so on. So they all interchange. So you get 64 different palm shapes that you can walk the circle with. You can walk a number 8 and a number 2 as you walk the circle. I can walk a number 3 and a number 2 as I walk the circle. I could spin around and hold a number 4 and a number 1 as I walk the circle. So it's all totally interchangeable what you do. When we first start off, we just simply start off with the number 3 hand. It's the most common, simple to understand palm. And then you start with the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and so on. Then only after you've gotten comfortable with that, then you would move on to the 64 palm positions. Okay, so the holding of the palms has a lot more to do with the body than it does the arms. The arms are of course important. We want to hold a good structure. So if you go back to, let's go back to our number 3 palm Qigong that we've already learnt in lesson 1. We're going to hold that like so. So you're going to take that same feeling, or the same structure in the body, and just sink your weight into one leg and turn on the circle. And see how the one hand is naturally pushing forward and the other hand is coming back into your center line. So your short wrist, the wrist of your short arm, is in your center. The palm of your long hand, your extended arm, is in the center of the circle. So when I say center, I may be referencing to the center of the circle, or I would say my center if I'm referencing to my own center line. So that's how we're going to look, you see. I can change directions and walk the circle. So both palms are actually facing into the center of the circle, but it's only my rear hand which is in my own chest center, like so. Okay. One arm is extending, one arm is slightly retracting, you see, because it's bent in just a little bit. As I said, the body is the more important thing here. So the structure of the arms you've already learnt. You literally just turn it and hold that structure. So, the way to get into it is to take your stance like so. Just take it doesn't really matter if you take an open step or a closed step. I'm going to use a closed step, like so. I'm going to hold my normal number 3 palm Qigong, but with the different footwork, see, like so. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to turn my left palm into the center, like that. So take your left palm into the center so it's facing the center of the circle. Then bring your right palm in, but don't bring it in using your shoulder like this. Bring it in using your waist, as we just said about the spiral going up through the body. So you see, now I'm engaged. My core is now engaged. If I relax my core, this will happen. My body will pull back. Now I'm engaging my core to pull my waist in. So you'll be primarily feeling it down through here, because that's the muscle twisting your body in. You'll feel it all through the lower back. There's a lot of other muscles engaging, but you'll primarily feel it in here, because that's twisting you, like as if you're taking a big band and pulling it across. You're going to feel it more across that side of your abdominal region. So this is the main concept we need to get, is that you are, I wouldn't call it separating, but you're creating that spiral. It's often called separating the hips from the waist, and in a sense you could call it that, separation of the hips to the waist, because the hips are facing along the circle like so, and then from here, from the waist, that's turning in. So it's like the hips are sitting there and the waist is turning in like so, and then that spiral goes up through the chest and into the shoulders. So just stand like so, put your hands in front of you, but instead of having the normal number 3 where they're even, just take left hand forward and right hand in your center, and then turn. See that? See how my arms are not moving at all? Only my body is moving. I'm not moving my arms. The shoulder structure of the arms is not moving at all. Only my waist is causing that movement to happen. This is what we want. Another good key to understanding how to hold the hands is to simply get the idea, what I've already said, of long arm on the center of the circle, short arm on your own personal center. So if I put this arm on the center of the circle, if I bring this hand in, that's not in my center now. You see, I've closed it off because I haven't turned my center in. The only way I can put this, if I place this hand in my center, like so, now it's not in the right position. Your short arm, grab your forearm, like that. Just on the thickest portion of your forearm, just grab hold of it, like that. And then just release it. Okay? So there shouldn't be a huge gap between the palms. It should be just grab and just release. It should be held just enough gap so that if I dropped that right palm, see how my fingertips would just brush the forearm. So there, obviously, that's physically grabbing the arm. So I'm not holding it here, now it's stuck in the middle, you see. I'm holding it just enough back so that if I dropped that hand, I'd just very fractionally brush my long arm. So that's how I hold the body, you see, like so, just on the inside. So if you want to attain that position whilst keeping your wrist in your center, the only way to do that is to turn your center. So put your one hand on the circle, on the center of the circle, put your other hand in your own center, and then without losing your center and closing off here underneath your arms, turn your body in until you reach that point, like so. And that's the basic body structure to how we want to walk the circle. Doesn't matter which palm you're using, that body structure is how we hold for all the different palm shapes. Okay, the way that we hold the actual palms is exactly the same as we covered in your Qigong, with that slight stretch in the palms, so no need to go over that. It's exactly the same as in the Qigongs. One extra thing you need to be aware of, now that we've added the hands in, is your knees. I mean, it's important to be aware of your knees even in the beginning, but it's unlikely that you need to worry about it so much. Now that we've brought the upper body in, because, if I just do it to the front of the circle, so I'm like that, You can see my right knee here is in line with my toe, see? Now, when I'm walking with my shoulders relaxed and my waist relaxed, the foot should just naturally, the knee should naturally sit over the toe like that. But now that I bring in the upper body and twist and spiral out to my left, what can happen is this. Can you see how my knee has now buckled inward? You see, it's not over here anymore, it's been pulled inward. So what I need to be aware of is now, because of this tension pulling across, it can cause my knee to buckle in. So I need to engage the outer area of the thigh and hold it back over the knee, over the toe. So as I come into posture, see now I'm feeling more tension down the outside of the thigh rather than in the front. So if I stand to the front, I'll feel more tension in the front of the thigh. But now, as I twist to the side, I still feel the tension in the front because that's holding me up, of course, but I can feel a lot more tension in the side of the thigh and up through the glutes. Because that's stopping this from happening. I'm opening that up because, of course, the hips are twisted this way, so I'm stopping that knee from falling in. And this applies to any time we do anything that involves torque in the body. So when we get into the circular form particularly, I'll point it out in the circular form in the individual movements what you would need to do, but we'll discuss it here before we even start the circular form. So the basic understanding of this is that if you open your hip to the open side, so say my knee's facing the camera, if my body is also facing the camera, I don't need to worry about the knee, like so. But as soon as my knee turns away from the camera, there's a chance that this will buckle in. So therefore I need to engage here to pull it back, stop that from buckling in. Same goes if I go the other way. If I come into a stance like this, because I'm turning into my hip, like so, the tendency is that that knee will buckle outside of the toe. So as I step into the stance, I need to squeeze the inner thigh to pull it inward and maintain that knee over toe. Don't let it sag to the outside. I've actually just recently done a whole video, it's about a half an hour long video just on this subject with relation to Taiji and Bagua and any training that you're doing. So I won't cover it all again here because it's on that video. So I'll put a little link in the bottom description, and that's all about how to protect your knees in your training. So have a look at that video down there in the link there. Even though in the video I'm referencing more so to the Taiji system, the principles are identical to what we would be doing in our Bagua training. A lot of people often say to me, oh, I don't do Bagua because I've got bad knees. Well, the only reason Bagua is bad for your knees is if you're doing it incorrectly. When we practice Taiji, Taiji can also be bad for your knees if done incorrectly. But because Taiji is typically done slower, and in the beginning at least, it's a little bit easier than the Bagua. When I say easier, it's not actually easier, it's less physically demanding on the body. It's a little bit more relaxing, simple, vertical, plain postures. Whereas the Bagua right from the start gets into some twisting, turning kind of movement. So on a physical level, it works your body a little bit more than the Taiji does. So because of this, there's more chance you will fall into incorrect alignments with your body. So the most common of these is when we come into stances like this, the knee can go out, as I've just explained. But particularly when I come back and into a stance, this kind of thing can happen. You can see there, the knee is not in line with the toe. So anytime you come into one of these stances and you come back, same thing, you've got to engage the back and hold it open. Now I'm keeping that knee nice and strong over top of that toe, not letting it sag inwards. So this will be applied all throughout your Bagua form particularly. It's important in the walking, but it's even more so important in the form, because in the form you're going to be doing so many more different postures. So you've got to be even more aware of maintaining good structure in your knees. Over time, of course, you'll just learn to feel what is correct in your knees. So you won't have to think to yourself, oh, okay, this is an opening move, which means I have to pull here to do this. This is a closing move, I've got to do this, and so on. You'll just naturally know, oh, that's not right. So you know you have to hold it out. you won't even go into that bad posture and then correct it anymore as you've progressed in your own training, because your body will just naturally hold good posture. It's like good posture in your upper body. If you have, a lot of people naturally sit like this, and they have to consciously think, oh, that's right, I should hold my good posture. They have to think about it. But over time, if you hold this posture for long enough, your central nervous system becomes aware that this is where the body should just naturally hold without thinking about it. So your subconscious takes over and holds that posturing, rather than having to constantly think all day long, hold posture, and then you stop thinking about it and you slouch back down. It should just automatically hold that good posture. So same goes for the knees. Your knees will automatically hold a good strong stance throughout any training that you're practicing. Okay, so let's just have a look at the basic palm positions now. Okay, whether I'm in an open or a closed step makes no difference. So if I'm holding the position there, I'm holding the position there. The upper body doesn't change as I walk along. So I'm going to show you the 8 palm positions. Once you start doubling them up and doing, say, a 1 and a 6 or something, you would still take the overall position. So let's say 6 is done like so, like this. Number 1 is done like this. So if I did number 6 in my right hand, it would mean it would be down here. If I did number 6 in my left hand, it would be down here, and the number 1 hand would be done up here, and so on. So no need to give you I'm not going to count all the 64 palms out for you. I'm just going to give you the 8, and you can piece them together when you feel ready. Okay, so obviously the number 1 hand, the actual shapes and principles of the palm are the same as what we covered in lesson 1 in the Qigong, so I'm not going to go over those. Just the body positioning. Sorry, the body positioning is again the same for all 8. So we've already covered how to hold the body. With the twisting, hold the knees strong, hips facing along the circle, upper body twisted in, like so. So there's the number 1 hand. When you're walking the circle, you can actually look at your extended arm. You can look to the center of the palm. This helps to bring awareness. It helps to teach you about peripheral vision. So by focusing there, you can be more aware of the things that are happening around you, rather than trying to focus what's in front of you or focus what's behind you. So it's just a very basic tool to bring focus to the palm. So by focusing on the palm, not only are you bringing energy into that palm, and because you're simply bringing your intention to that palm, so you're bringing it, and your palm even more so than when we do the double palm Qigong, you can't look at the hand because obviously you can't look at both at the same time. So we just gaze forward. When we're doing the one-legged Qigong like this, or the Qigong walking as such, like that, you can actually gaze at the palm. This brings even more intention into that front hand. So that makes that your yang hand and this your yin hand, because you're bringing intention into that palm. And as I say, it makes you peripherally aware of what's going on around you. At a later stage, when you're advancing in your training, there's no need to actually look at your hand anymore. You can just gaze forward because you've got your peripheral vision trained, and also your intention will be in your palm regardless of whether you're looking at it or not. I can bring my intention into my palm without having to physically look at it, but it is a good little tool just to bring a bit more intention into that palm when you're first learning. Okay, so back to the shapes. There's number 1. Okay, so it's the same as the form. Same as the Qigongs that we did. Number 2, same principle. See, there's the number 2 shape as we've already covered. Number 3, like so. Number 4. So 1 to 4 are all the same height. The front hand is basically in front of your face. Oh, unless it's a flat hand, like so or like so, in which case it's neck height. So your wrist, think about your wrist as roughly about neck or shoulder height, like so. So if it's an upward facing palm, like so, the palm is going to be in front of your face. If it's a flat palm, the number 1 and the number 2, of course, is going to be at neck height. So number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. Number 5 palm, like we did in the Qigong, it's about belly height, like so. Number 6 palm is down like this, always with that little stretch in the palms, but not too much, just a subtle stretch. Number 7 is back up to the top. Remember that knife edge is your intention, so that's the thing that should be facing to the center. Don't turn it over here, don't turn it over here. The knife edge of that palm faces to the center. And then number 8, of course, remember, what I showed at the end of the Qigong lesson. Remember, I showed you on the back how the back engages. So particularly for all of these, but particularly the number 8 palm, because there's so much squeeze coming through the front, you've got to hold the shoulders back. No, don't let your shoulders hunch over like this. So pull your shoulders back and down as you come into that number 8 palm position. So that's how we would hold the number 8 palm. Okay, so that's the 8 palm Qigong, how you hold them on with reference to the circle. Now, when we start putting in the actual walking, the key element, you've learned how to hold the body now, so you know how to hold the structure of the arms with reference to the circle. But now we've got to actually start moving. So let's go back to the very basic palm, the simple, I guess we call it the basic palm because it's the most common fighting palm. It's the most useful, simple fighting palm. The number 1, the number 2, and all the other ones, of course, they have very important martial reasons as well as health reasons. But the number 3 palm is your basic, fundamental starting point for your martial stuff. So let's go back to the number 3 palm. So the left palm, the long hand, is here in front of your face. The right hand, remember, is just off the thick part of your forearm, like so. So your wrist is about in line with your long elbow. But remember, that wrist must be in your own center line. Okay, now as we walk the circle, you've got to try to do all the stuff you've already done. So you might want to try, this would be the only time, remember I said right at the beginning, never just walk the circle and you're like you're doing nothing. But for just a little while, just a very few, just do 5 minutes or something, just to get into your mind the concept of locking the wrists into the center whilst walking the circle. It may be a good idea to not concentrate too much on the legs now. So just hold the center like that and just step. Don't just walk, as I said, don't do nothing, but don't worry about all those extra details, the squeezing, the twisting, and all that stuff we've already gone on about in the last lesson. Just take a simple little step like so. So hold your center line, step through, at least step without falling forward. That's all I want you to do. Step and then step. Place. So just a nice controlled, balanced step without placing that front foot down onto the ground. The palms must be kept extended, or the long hand in this case. So don't let it sag back. Keep it out, like you're pushing something away from you. Okay, let's walk. 1, 2. So just a very simple walk. Nothing special here. Just getting used to the body positioning, that your hips are going around the circle and your upper body is twisting in to the center of the circle. So that's all we're doing in the beginning. So see, every time you step, you got to turn to the left. Because if I just step, see, now my hands come off the center. So every time I step, I've got to adjust and turn my body. So it feels like you're turning to your left the whole time, and then of course you go the other way to turn to your right. So we're now not really doing any of the principles of the walking, we're just getting used to the concept of holding the body in that stance whilst holding our balance, maintaining center line on the circle, like so. Then you're going to start to bring in all the principles which you learned in the previous lesson of the actual walking. So once you're getting kind of comfortable with that, let's go on to the actual walking now. So the key aspect here, I've already said it, is to not allow the waist movements and the leg movements to affect your upper body. So each time you step, you've got to say to yourself, right, I've got to lock onto that. Another good training method, if you can, rather than doing it on a circle like this, you can actually do it around some kind of a narrow pole, or don't do it around a large tree, because then you've got that much tree and you're still kind of facing the tree even if you're rocking from side to side. So you want a very narrow tree, no more than about, 6 inches diameter or something, going up in front of you, or a pole, or it doesn't even have to be round, it can be a square like a pillar, it might be something, part of your house or something. That way it can be actually in front of you, you see? Because if I'm here, I'm like, oh, where's my center? Because it's down here on the ground. So I don't want to have to look down at the ground. So when you're first learning, is it a good idea to have something there in front of you, and then when you go, you can go, oh, no. So your palm should always be between your vision and that pole that's in front of you. So you shouldn't be able to see the pole. The palm should cover the pole. So as I turn, the palm stays covering that pole. Okay, so as we now apply all the movements we've already learnt for the lower body, we've got to bring the weight forward, pick up the ball of the foot, squeeze in, twist to the left, all of that concept. You see, the hands will just, this is fine. The hands, they're not dead. They're not like a statue. But this kind of movement is fine. What we don't want is something like that, see? As long as your long arm is staying locked on the center and your short arm is staying locked onto the forearm, so for example, we wouldn't want something like that, are separating and closing. We don't want something like that. The hands stay locked into each other, into your own center, and into the center of the circle. So those are the three things you want to try to lock in. And then we walk the circle, getting that squeezing to happen, the twisting of the waist. See, I'm going to turn my waist in now, there, around here so you can see. Turn the waist in, but my hands are still on the center. I haven't let it go past the center. And then back. Now I'm going to turn my waist out of the circle because that's pulling the foot in. So that's probably the most common one there, is that's where the hands will go, off the line to the right hand side. So that's probably the most common mistake, is like so. So think, okay, I've got to lock that to there, I've got to throw my hips and waist that way, but hold my body this way, and then pull it back. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like. Nice and controlled. Oh, by the way, when you're walking the circle, if you, for example, if you watch yourself back, I watch myself back sometimes and I notice my heel might be just maybe a little bit like that when I'm walking the circle. Ideally, yes, as I explained in the previous lesson, your heel should not in any way roll. That's what we're aiming for. But sometimes, depending on the angle of your body, every now and again you might just get a little bit of a roll. That doesn't actually matter so much. The importance is that you're trying as hard as you can to not let that happen. So let's say, for example, we learnt in the previous lesson, I pulled up that ball of the foot. Now as I bring the weight forward, let's assume I've got a lot of tension in my lower leg, right? So if I have a lot of tension in my lower leg, remember I've taken a longer stance, so this is a difficult posture to get out of. Now, I can't quite do it. Let's say I can't quite do it. I'm learning this and I can't quite do it. So long as, okay, see there, now the heel came up just before the toe did. I'll just pull my pants up in case you couldn't see that. Now I'm trying, but watch. See how the heel just came up before the toe and then it came through. But can you see that I was trying my hardest not to let that happen? So ideally, I want to be able to pull that heel up totally by itself. So pull the ball of the foot up first, and when I pick up the heel, up. You see, the toe doesn't touch the ground again. So the toe's already up, and when the heel comes up, the toe does not go back down. That's the ideal situation. But if you've just got too much tension, you physically can't do it. Everything's a development. It's like learning to do a chin-up. If you can't do a chin-up, there's no point in trying to do a chin-up. You've got to do something else before you can move on to that first chin-up that you may do. So it's all development. So bring the weight forward, pick up the ball of the foot. Now, if you do this, now I'm clearly not trying at all. I'm being very lazy and I'm just letting the heel roll up. So I'm not learning anything now. I've got to try, now let's say, okay, now it's rolling a little bit, but I'm at least trying my hardest to hold those toes up. Even though that heel came up, I'm still learning the correct core training that I should be learning from my circular training. And then eventually, through time and time, you will get it to the point where you can lift the toes and then keep the toes up as you pick up that heel. Okay, so we've got the basics of actually how to walk now. How to walk the circle, holding that correct structure. So we're not throwing the arms around, we're locking into that position, and we're holding and maintaining all of those core movements that we already learnt in the previous lesson. And so on. Oh, one more thing before we move on to the changes, just a little training tool. If you take the number 1 hand, like so, and then get a couple of balls, like a tennis ball or an orange, any round object, and just place them on your palms. Don't hold them, spread your fingers across so the ball just sits in your palm, like so. It'll just sit in the little cup of your palm there, little indentation in the center. Now, if you do your circle walking and go like this, you see how my hands shook? This doesn't apply so much to the slow walking. When you're walking slowly, of course, even if you did this, the orange wouldn't fall off your hand. But once you start getting that little snap coming through your walk, so that little movement, see how this happened down here. Now there may have been a little shake in the top of the hands, but not this, not a movement from right and left and so on. So we shake the hips underneath, which sends the legs through, but the upper body, you see, stays as we've been talking about, holding that center line. So if you do it incorrectly, and you've got that orange, or in fact you don't need the orange on both hands, just put it on your front hand, that way you only damage one orange. But yeah, if you do this incorrectly and you do the step and do that, and your hands shake, then obviously the orange is going to fall off your hand. So if you can maintain that orange placed on your hand and take your step each time, then you know you're getting somewhere with locking that into the center. Okay, we've just got one more thing to go before we have finished the basics of circle walking, and that is the inside and outside changes. Just to simply change the direction of where you're going. The inside change, you know those stand-up paddle boards? You know, like a huge big surfboard and people stand on them and paddle along with one paddle? There's this guy going across the lake, and he's got 2 dogs front and back on the thing. The dog, they look very happy, they're wagging their tail, they're like, yeah, this is cool. That's funny to see. Anyway, what was I saying? In and outside change, yeah. Do the inside change first, that's the easy one. Then the outside change is a little more difficult. Okay. Got to roll your pants up, make sure you don't stand on the edge of them. Right, so we're walking around, we've walked around our circle, we've come to an inside step. Forget about the hands for now, just have a look at the grounding. You're just going to swivel on your heels, very simple. That's it. Very, very simple movement like so. Notice how now, of course, your feet are not going to be, once you've changed direction, your feet are not going to be exactly placed on the circle as I've explained. You know, when I explained in the previous lesson of exactly where your feet should be placed, heel on the line, ball of the foot, toe on the line, things like this. So, because that ball of the foot is on the line and the heel of the rear foot is on the line, when I switch direction, of course, it means that the rear foot's going to be kind of going through the center of the foot, and the front foot is, of course, still going to be heel on the line. Once I start walking again, when I slip that front foot forward, after you've change, you still do a little slip step. Because remember, every time before we step, we go slip and then step through. So if I've done a change of direction, my feet are now not positioned exactly correctly on the circle. They're still positioned exactly correctly with reference to structure within my own body and stance. It's just that the circle needs to be moved a little bit that way when I walk. So, of course, as you slip the foot, you just slip the foot and adjust the foot. So you adjust that foot so that the big toe only is touching the edge of the circle. And of course, when I bring the other foot through, that then comes to the heel on the circle. As far as I can tell, I'm not 100% sure about this, but as far as I can tell from all the old books on Bagua, from Zhangjiao and so on. From what I can see, in the little pictures and diagrams, they still have the circle on the ground, but they seem to be usually just standing inside the circle. That's what the diagrams show anyway. I haven't looked into this very much, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But they don't actually stand on a specific spot in the circle. They just sort of use the circle as a rough kind of guideline where to move. So I don't know actually if my father's teacher created this pedantic way of where to place the feet, or if my father created that himself. I never asked him about that. But as I say, it's not to say that the foot positioning is any different to what the older original guys were doing. It's simply that we're using the circle to help us to find that correct position. So rather than just having a circle on the ground and me standing like this, standing inside the circle as I'm walking the circle, like so, I can say to myself now, I can't tell you, I've got to say parallel or this foot in line with that foot or something like that, as I explained earlier. But if I move it to stand on the circle, and the circle, as you can see, is about 1 inch thick rather than a very large circle. If it's a very large circle, again, there's not really any reference point. But if you've got a narrow circle, just about 1 inch thick, now I can tell myself, toe on the line, and that will give me the correct alignments of the feet. So as I say, I don't actually know where that's come from as far as like put your heel on it or your toe on it, but it is a fantastic tool for knowing exactly where to place your feet as we practice. Okay, so back to the inside change. So I've stepped through, I've taken my step. I don't slip before I turn, because remember, slip means you're going to step forward. If I slip, it means I'm going this way, you see. So I'm going to do my kick. There's my step, that little pause, and then I'm just going to swivel straight back the other way. Notice obviously the weight shifts straight into the back leg as I step. It's often said in Bagua, just a little side note, I forgot to say it in the beginning, it's often said in Bagua that Bagua is always on the back leg. I don't know, well, I do know where this has come from, but a lot of people say, but hang on, that posture's front weighted. I thought Bagua was always on the back leg. Everything's on the back leg. I think someone has misinterpreted this because they've seen or read something where someone is talking about the walking from Bagua, not the form of Bagua. Because the form of Bagua, you can look back to the very, very old books and little diagrams of Zhang Zhangjiao practicing his circular form, which is what we're doing here. And you can see there's loads of postures which are clearly front-weighted postures. So I've never actually counted the moves, which ones are back-weighted and which ones are front-weighted, but I would say there's at least 50-50 of some postures are front-weighted, and there's some back-weighted postures. So there's some back-weighted and some front-weighted postures. But with reference to the walking, that's where we're always on the back foot. Now, although we have to shift the weight to the front foot, obviously it has to shift forward because we have to step into that foot. But the reason they say the weight is always in the back foot is because when I step, so there's my slip step, you see, so the weight's obviously in my back foot now. Now as soon as I step, before you know it, that leg that I put the weight into, it's already my back leg, you see. So again, I think this has come from watching people do the circle walking quite quickly. If I step quickly, it doesn't look like I've got my weight in my front leg because my weight's in my back leg, and as I step, my weight's in my back leg again, you see. It's only for such a split second in the front leg that when someone's walking the circle, you see, it looks more or less like I'm always sitting in my back leg. It would only be if I did the circle walking very, very slowly, then of course, this is what I was saying earlier about doing it as a qigong. Then of course you would physically see that forward weight shift. But the normal sort of way that most people do their Bagua stepping, their Bagua walking, is to be done with that little snap step through. That's the more normal way to do it. Not to say that it's the better way to do it, it's just the more commonly used way to do it. So So it can be done very fast, medium, or very, very slow. They're all important in your training. I actually say that doing it slower is more important in the beginning because it makes you understand the concept of the movement a little bit more. So yeah, I think that concept of the weight is always in the back foot has come somewhere from watching people do the circular walking, not so much the form itself. So when we do a change, when we do an inside change, we're going to swivel on both heels. As soon as you start to swivel, you use your center, that turns you, see? That turns your body around, like so. So think about this region here, pulling across, and then you think about your thigh to push your weight into your other leg, so you twist and push, and that sends your weight down into your rear leg, see? So, just have a go at doing that inside change. So you can see me constantly adjusting my feet here. There's rocks underneath my carpet. There's a big rock there which I can't swivel on. So it looks like a nice flat surface, but actually underneath it's a bit uneven. So as I say, if you're first learning this, it would be advisable to try it on a nice flat surface. It'll make that a little bit easier, so you can focus purely on yourself. Once you're advancing in your training, then of course you should be able to do it outside on the grass and things like this. But when you're walking around the circle, you know, if say like that little rock, where was it there? Let's say for example I did my step and I slipped to there. Because my foot's off the ground, maybe I didn't notice that rock was there. So when I come through, I might go, oh, that was a bit, and then, so I might wobble a little bit. There's nothing wrong if you've stepped on something uneven underneath your grounding. You're not going to be absolutely perfect because something has happened to you that you weren't expecting. So, oh, okay, you've had to adjust to that. So don't think to yourself, you know, when you see myself or any Bagua teacher or something, if they do a move and just, you know, a little bit of a wobble there or something, that's not necessary. If they do it all the time, then okay, you know, maybe they need they're not so good with their balance. But if you see someone walking the circle absolutely perfectly, and they're walking really nice, and then you just a little once every now and again, that's not such a big deal. Don't worry about being the perfect god-like master of martial arts that people expect you to be. As I say, particularly if you're on an uneven surface like that. So of course you want to get those wobbles to a minimum, but as I say, if you're walking, you know, 10 steps perfect and one step with a little bit of a wobble, don't worry about it. You're plenty on the right track if you're getting 10 steps right and one wobble. Where were we? Okay, back to the inside change. Trying to find a flat piece of ground, just swivel, so you push and turn. Like so. When you first learn it, you can actually do this and go back to not using your hands anymore. Just relax your hands, just turn, like so. The weight's totally centered in that rear foot. Those of you who may be studying the Taiji system, or my own Taiji system, not mine personally, but the system I teach, if you've practiced the small sansao from Taiji, this is exactly the same. So, like in our small sansao, when we swivel and do our strikes like so, it's exactly the same footwork when we do our inside change in Bagua. The hands are going to be different, but the body work. So, they're your two core principles. Turn from the center, push from the thigh. So you're emptying that front leg. As soon as you get there, before you even try to do the slip step, try to swivel and just pick your foot off the ground, you see? If you can't even pick your foot off the ground, then there's no way you're going to be able to do a slip step. So don't swivel and try to slip straight away, because chances are you're going to do the wrong movement. First thing we're going to do is swivel, pick up the foot. When you first try it, you're going to have to go swivel, and then find the point where you can pick up that foot. You want to try to get that motion to limit the pause on the end to as little as possible before you pick up that foot. So you're going to swivel. See how the foot came almost as soon as, I can't really do this slowly, but as soon as those toes get to that side, you can pick that foot off the ground, rather than going swivel, balance, pick the foot up. So of course you can do that in the beginning when you're learning. You can swivel, find yourself, and then pick up your foot. but then try to get that finding your balance to a minimal. So, pick it up, swivel, pick it up, till you can literally get it to the point where as soon as you're there, the foot's coming straight off the ground. Maintain good posture, just let your arms swing around. Okay, adding the hands in. Hands on the inside change, again, fairly simple. It's the outside change that gets a bit more complicated. So we're there like that. All you got to do is switch your hands to the opposite side. So you're simply going to extend your right hand. So this is my right hand now. Extend that and retract the left hand. Notice how the left hand, go back to the same side, the left hand comes straight back so that you actually strike the inner edge of your forearm, right down the inside there, like so. Right across the meaty section, the big thick area of the forearm. And then it just slips over the top. So you're simply doing a number 3 palm strike. Back to the inside one. Now, notice how as I do it, my left fingers, I don't want to get it caught like this. So my left palm just slightly relaxes and then comes back to the number 3. You see? Rather than having to go bang. You see, if I left it in the number 3 hand, I'd have to do a very awkward, large movement to get it back to its position, to get it underneath the other arm. So as you change hands, see there? The rear hand, which was a number 3 hand, that stays as a number 3 hand. But the front hand, which is a number 3 hand, it actually changes just slightly, almost like you're going into a number 2 palm, like so, to allow that hand. Don't watch the feet now, I'm just doing this quite slowly to be able to do the hands. Bang, see, so that hand can just slip over the top, and as soon as the fingertips come underneath the arm, but they can flick back up, you see, back into that number 3, and then you're ready for the other side. Then you can do the exact same thing, back the other way, strike straight into your forearm, so you're pulling this back and pumping this one forward, like so, and into posture. So you can just get used to that, just strike straight towards the center. Notice it's a pumping action, I'm not going like this. See, I'm not sweeping, so I'm not striking straight into the arm from where I am, because if I do that, my strike's going over this way, you see. I want my rear hand to strike straight towards my front hand. So if I didn't move my front hand, my left hand would actually, my right hand, my rear hand, would strike straight towards the palm. But I'm not going to clank the palms together. What I'm going to do is, as this one goes forward, the left hand tucks back, you see. So that's giving you that position where the hands can actually strike each other. So that hand stays referencing to the center. You see? This is going to build up your forearms. We get more into this when we get into the circular form as well, striking the forearms for our martial practice. When you first start out, just do it very gently, just a brush across the top of the arm, like so. You see? Nothing too heavy, but build it up over time and get it quite strong so you're conditioning and strengthening your forearms. Okay, so I think that gives you everything you need for the inside change. Oh, of course, if you were doing any of the other palms when you do an inside change, for example, it's only going to work from a bumping your arm. You can do the inside change, by the way, just as a strike, like so. See how the one hand pulls back, still goes into that kind of a number 2 palm shape, like it's pulling something back, and the other hand comes out. That's how it would work more of a martial sense. So both are valid, but in the beginning we want to get that little bit of conditioning. For a martial application that you would use this for, you wouldn't strike your own arm, of course, because you're going to take the power out of the actual strike. So with this one, there's the power, and then you just kind of coming back into position. You see? You see? So it's not power to here, because you're sapping some of the power by hitting your own arm. So that's purely just a conditioning thing. I mean, you could represent you've got someone around the neck and hitting him in the neck or something like that, but ideally it's just a conditioning thing, realistically. So from a martial perspective, that's what we'd be looking at, you see. So now you can see there's that looks more like fighting. I look more like I'm striking something when I'm coming out, because I'm no longer taking my power out by striking my own arm. So both are valid. It's not even to say one is basic and one is advanced. Just do them both ways. I still practice them both ways. Sometimes I'll strike my arm when I do my inside change. Sometimes I'll do it without striking my arm. When you do it with striking your arm, as long as you're getting an impact there, then you're doing the right thing. When you're doing it without striking the arm, you're not physically touching anything. So you need to make sure you've got the correct body movement happening when you do it. So think to yourself like you're grabbing something and pulling it backwards with that front hand and striking out with the rear hand, like so. So what I'm saying is, don't just put all your intent in the front hand. You see? Nothing happened here. Nothing happened here. Now watch what my right hand does. You see? See how that violently pulled backwards? Like, you know, the applications are, it's not one particular application. You could envisage all sorts of different things, which you'll see when we do the form, once we start talking about the applications of the form. So yeah, you could be, I don't know, he may have taken a block, you may be taking a wrist and pulling him onto that strike. You could grab his head and pull him, strike him to break his neck, things like this. But some kind of a dragging in application and palming out. So what I was saying is, when we go into the other 7 palms, I don't know, let's take number 1 palm. Let's just go through them. Now, if I do a number 1 palm, of course, I can still do a number 1 change, but see, the bump now is going to be a little different when I do that change. Or I can do it without the bump, like so. Number 2 palm, same deal. I can bump across the back of the forearm now with this one. It's just a brush, like so, or like so. I can really get that power going through. As you can see, I'm getting that into a bit more of a martial sense now. When you're learning that, my energy's naturally building up and I'm getting a bit worked up while I'm doing it. But when you're learning, we're just going to keep it to a fairly well controlled and slow manner, rather than that fully explosive manner which I was just doing there. But it gives you a good idea to see it done like that, to know where you're looking to progress to in your own training. So the number 3 palm change, of course, bang, bang, you're getting that striking, that's what we've already done. The number 4 palm, same thing, you see, you're going to get your palm to actually slam across the back of your forearm, like so, like so. So you're getting that nice strike down the outside edge. Doing it without that, of course, you just draw it in, like I've just explained. Number 5 palm, which is done down low. It doesn't matter if you're going from an upper one to the lower one. You could go, for example, from number 4 or number 1, doesn't matter, and then go down into number 5 down here. So obviously you just have to drop your hands as you go into that. So taking the number 5 hand, this is the only one which you're not really going to get, because the hands are not crossing, you see. The hands are coming through this way, so you're not really going to ever get a strike there, like so. Because if you change it to actually striking the hand, as I just did then, this kind of thing, you could do that, I guess. I wouldn't say it's a terrible thing to do, to strike the arm like that. However, to me, by doing that, you're no longer doing the number 5 palm. Because I'll just do it towards the camera for you like that. If I flex the palms in order to get that bump, like so, that's no longer a number 5. That's more like a number 3 turned downwards. Number 5 hand is like that. It's pointing forward. The intention is on the fingers. So when we do it, you see, the fingers might just brush each other just fractionally, like so. But what I'm saying is you're not going to get an impact with the number 5 palm. Like so, when you come in. with that number 5. Okay, number 6, when we walk, like so. This can be the same as number 4, so you can get the back of the arm striking and strike down into the other side, like so. Or, as I say, without the bump as we change. Number 7, this is number 7. So number 7 can be, again, like number 3, only of course you're striking with the knife edge rather than the heel palm. Same thing, the front hand, of course. Any of these ones where they're stuck up like this, of course, you've got to let it loose and then bring it back to that number 7, like so. Number 8, final one, the difficult one, as we come through here, like so. So you just relax the hands a little bit because you need to spiral into the movement, you see. So I wouldn't want to go like this. Inside change. So the hands are spiraled like so, you see. Now, if I were going to do that, I wouldn't want to go, see how they feel a bit dead? They're not doing anything. So just before you move, see that? Just relax them a little bit. You don't even have to think about anything. Just that tension, that squeeze that you're holding on that position, just relax it. Just let it unspiral back the other way. So you've got it turned in like so as you're walking the circle. You're about to do a change. Just as you start to shift the weight, see how they unspiral? They just go back the other way, just a fraction. So you get wah, and then as you swivel, you're going to get that spiral going back into that other side again. And same thing, one hand's pulling back, one hand's striking outward as you do the strike. Both still spiraling upwards. So as I change the weight and do it, we get that kind of thing coming into the number 8. Like so. Doing that slowly. So let it unspiral and spiral. Unspiral and spiral into the movement. Okay, so that principle that we just applied to the number 8 palm of a little unspiral and then spiral again, that applies to all the other 7 as well. I didn't mention that before. So if you take the number 1 hand, we don't want to go from a number 1 hand holding the number 1 hand and keep holding the number 1 hand, otherwise it's dead. In exactly the same way again, go back to your Qigong lesson. So the same way that we did our Qigong, remember we didn't go like hold the number 1 and then hold that dead hand all the way up. It was a yin hand to start and then progressively went into that yang hand. Just like then if we go into a yin hand, it was a yang hand to lift and then a push into that yin hand. So there's always a change from yin to yang. Yang being this kind of a shape, flexed up, and yin being this kind of a shape. So when we do the number 1 hand, for example, we're there like that. Just as you start to move, there's just, see? Basically just relax. You don't have to even do anything. You're there in the posture. Don't think like, do something before it. Don't do something. Just stop doing what you're already doing. So I'm doing something here. I'm holding that intention in the palms and that nice flexion to bring that energy in and strengthen the palm. But as I'm about to do the strike, it's just going to go, see? They just do nothing. Just soften the hands up. And as you start into the next move, you start flexing them again. When I say start flexing, I mean the stretch of the palm as what we've been doing. So you relax, and as you go in, you stretch back into the palm. But also the flexion of the wrist. So the number 3 palm would be the obvious example. If I'm there like, if I'm there like that, and that's my rear hand about to come through, I would relax the hand so that the wrist goes yin, the hand also goes yin, and then it can strike forward, flexing the fingers, but also kicking the wrist up as you do it. So there's always movement in each one of your changes, and you never have static hands. That's the key to this lesson. So yeah, number 1 hand, just there, just soften your hands and then flex them again. Number 2 hand, same thing. You've got your stretch on your hands, just soften them slightly, and then stretch them slightly. Soften, stretch. soften, stretch. Number 3, same thing, little soften, stretch, soften, stretch. This particularly applies to your rear hand, the one that's about to strike. Number 4 would be the same thing. From there, they just. But see, in this case, let's say, because this is a good example of the yin movement. Because this is a yin movement, I wouldn't want to soften to more yin, because then I got nowhere to go. You see. So with this movement, the softening. Look, if I just relax my hands, you see, they actually go slightly yang because of the shape of the arms. If I relax my number 3 hand, this happens. If I relax my number 1 hand, because I'm drawing it in this case, the number 1 hand will stay yang if I just relax it. So with the number 1 hand, there's a little dropping of the elbows to create that yinness. So some you just have to relax, others you have to do a little bit of a movement. So number 1 hand, a little bit of a yin and soften the hands, you see, and then flex. Number 2 hand, they're already yin, like so. So you can just have a slight softening of the palms. So all you have to do with this one is literally just soften the hands. That's it. You don't have to change the wrists at all. Just soften the hands and then strike out into your number 2 hand. Number 3 hand, the rear hand, well, both hands soften, you see, so softening the palms and the wrists, and then they strike out into their position. Number 4 hand, when they soften, they go a little bit yang, just a fraction to that side. So then when they strike, they're actually hammering that way because they're doing a yin strike. Number 5 hand, same thing, a little softness. So there's a little bit of a yin movement, like so. And then back into the yang movement. Number 6, which is down like this. Again, as you start to move, there'll just be a little bit of a, see that? A little drawing up. Because I need to strike down, I need to therefore lift the hands up in order to get that downward thrust into the posture. If I leave the hands there, I can't get downward thrust. It's going to become a lateral movement. So I need to effectively go like that, but just a tiny, tiny bit. So from there, there's just that little bit of a lift as you come through, like sort of halfway through the twist. And you see, now I get that downward thrust. And as I lift, there's a little yang movement and a softening, but it's a soft yang, you see. When I say it's a yang shape, I just mean that the wrist is bent back this way. Technically, the whole movement in general is yin because it's all very soft. So you're letting the hands go to the outside bend as you lift them up slightly, soften the palms, and then coming into the number 6. The number 7, that's exactly the same as the number 3 with reference to how to change the hands, identical. And then number 8 we've already done. Okay, moving on to the outside change. The outside change is a lot more difficult for holding your balance and so on. It's probably applying the outside change whilst walking the circle in a fast motion is probably one of the most difficult balance training exercises. People tend to think movements like this in the form are the difficult movements for balance, but actually it's just these simple outside changes where we've got to come from here and spin back around to there without toppling yourself over. It's not too hard to do stationary like that, but once you start actually walking around and then having to do the change and then slip the front foot forward, that's when it becomes difficult. So let's just first go over the basic footwork as we did with the inside change. So of course you're on the closed step now, so I can't turn inside the circle like so. I've got to turn outside the circle. Whenever you do a change, you mustn't move a foot, you see. You must keep your heels planted and do a change. So obviously if my inside leg is forward, that means I have to turn outside the circle. If my outside leg is forward, that means I have to turn inside the circle, and so on. Okay, so outside change, exactly the same thing as what we did before. Turn from the center, push your weight across into your empty leg, so you shift the weight as you turn your center, but it's a much bigger turn this time, all the way around, back to the other side. So you're literally back to your normal walking position, the exact opposite. That front hip foot is turned in. Don't leave it over here, because that's where your balance is. So turn it right in, 45 degrees off the circle, and center your weight down. So of course all the weight is in the back foot. So try it just slow and controlled first. Turn your center, start swiveling on both heels, and bring it around. and just control, pick your foot up. Like we did with the other one. Swivel and then pick your foot up. Swivel first, get used to that for a while. But then just swivel, pick up your foot. Swivel, pick up your foot. Once that momentum has stopped and your arms have slapped around, la-di-da-di-da, up, pick up that foot. And then just try to speed it up a little bit. So you use a little bit of momentum. See? So your body's going to get there, your feet are going to get there much before your hands are. Not when we actually do the hand movement, I'm talking about like now while we're doing it relaxed. So, see? So just let your arms throw themselves around. To hold your balance, when we come into that posture, you squeeze the quad in like so. Now, basically what's happening is, okay, if I do it to the front of the camera, imagine like you're trying to pull your feet together, okay? So you've swung around like this and then engage in here, like you're trying to drag that front foot back across your standing leg. So you're just pulling it inward slightly. It's not pulling, well, okay, if I be pedantic about it, it's pulling like that, like it's going to come straight backwards. See? So with reference, let's have a look at the circle. So if I were here on the circle, it would pull, well, it would pull like as if you're staying on the circle. So it would pull like as if the front heel would slide back on that circle. It wouldn't pull, for example, this way. That's going outside the circle. That would cause me to fall into the center if I pulled that way. So it's pulling that way. You see, you engage and pull back. When you do this, however, I'll just do it this way so you can see my rear leg. Okay, like this. Actually, I'll do it over here. You can still see me there, can't you? Okay, so I'm still on the circle. Okay, now I'm squeezing inward, like so, but it's a forward and backward squeeze, like that, you see. Don't allow this to happen. So don't try to pull your left knee. When I say squeeze, don't just go like that. See, there's nothing happening there. You've got to squeeze like as if you're trying to drag the ground along with you. Don't just bend your knees. That does nothing for you. You've got to, you see? If I were on ice, my feet would come in, okay? But because I'm not on ice, I'm pulling the ground, like as if I'm trying to move the earth, the two pieces of earth together. So what happens is, because I'm squeezing, because I'm turning into the movement, of course, because I'm turned into my right, to my closed side, my hips are turning in, so I still must apply the principle of maintaining structure in this knee. So do not let this knee, that's the most important thing, is do not let this knee come out of alignment with the toe. Hold that out. So when you turn your hips in, you must hold this out by engaging down here. But then you squeeze here as well, you see? Like as if, as I say, as if this foot's coming back towards the other foot. And that will give you some torque in the legs and it'll help to hold your balance. However, when we do that, it doesn't mean you're putting weight in the front leg. So, I can only really show you this if you come to a class. If I were to put my foot, if I put my foot on top of your foot, like so, in this posture, you could feel now there's pressure on that front foot, like so. I can feel pressure on my front foot. However, there is no body weight on that front foot. So it's a squeezing pressure, it's a muscular pressure, pushing down into the ground. It's not this, which is a body weight pressure. Your body weight must be 100% centered down through your rear leg. You squeeze the quad, squeezing your right hamstring, squeezing it in like so, to pull that in. Now there's a pressure. So I'm pressurizing that front leg. It's a controlling weight. But there's no actual body weight in that leg at any time. So you spin around the outside, and just as you get to the end, you squeeze your legs together. So just find for yourself. It's difficult to explain exactly which direction they're squeezing, but you have a basic understanding that that front foot drags back on the circle, or without actually dragging back, of course, but just there, it just creates stability in your lower leg region. But make sure when you do that, the key element is don't lose any of your other principles, such as don't put any weight forward, don't let the knee buckle, things like this. So you must be able to still maintain your normal walking position, but there's just that slight squeeze. As soon as that's happened, so you come around, there's just that squeeze, just on the end of the movement, squeeze, and then you slip. See, that's why you mustn't have weight forward, of course, because as soon as you've gotten there, there's a little squeeze to control that momentum. Because of all that momentum going around, now in application, hopefully you hit someone with that. So, bah, when you strike him, of course, that's going to stop all your momentum going across. But if you miss, you have to be able to regain your own balance. So that's when we squeeze the kwa in here. So we throw it around, that's where I squeeze, you see, just there. Just, I don't know, there's no exact point, but let's say roughly from when my hand is on the line to the center. So let's say I'm coming around, trying to do it slowly. From about here, that's when I start squeezing. There is when I start squeezing the kwa. And as soon as I've got there, there's the squeeze, slip. And then I slip that front foot, and then I step through, step again, step through. Okay. Oh, I can't remember if I showed that on the outside, on the inside change as well. Of course, after you've done your inside change, you slip that foot. I think I did say it. But anytime you do any change, inside or outside, you always slip. So if I've done my inside change, like so, I slip. I walk through, I change, I slip. Each time I do an outside, back to here, I slip. And so on. Inside, slip, step. Outside, slip, step. Inside, slip, step. The only time you wouldn't do a slip after a change is if you do a change directly back the other way. I think I just did one of them then. So let's say I go bang, I'm going to go step, step. Now I'm going to go change, slip. So you only slip if you're going to take a step forward. You don't slip if you're going to change straight back the other way. So you can do any combination of changes that you wish. Don't just sit there doing one change though. Make sure you do a bit of walking in there as well. So you might change, slip, step through, slip, step through, slip, step through. Now I'm on the outside change. So now I can do my outside. Squeeze the kwa. Slip, step through, slip, step through. You can do either, one change, start off with one changes, just one change by itself. And then slip, and then go, okay, next change. Yeah, that's cool, slip, and start like that. Then you can start walking the circle and do double changes. So you might be walking this way and you'll say to yourself, right, I'm going to try a, and then, so you do two changes but then keep going the same way. So you're slipping through, doing your little steps, slip, change. You see? So you're getting your changes happening, 1, 2. Same goes for the outside change. If I step through, what? And then slip. And carry on. So, I think that gives you all that you need for the body mechanics of it. The footwork at least. Now we've got to add what the hands do, because the hands, as you may have seen there, the hands generate a lot of the momentum for this one. The inside change, all the force is coming from the legs and the waist. The hands are just putting the strike out on the end. Whereas the outside change, it's actually the arm, which gives you some of that momentum coming around into the posture. But with reference to the core, we've covered everything there. So you've got to push again from this leg into the other leg. So you center your weight down through that sweet spot, little squeeze of the kwa, and then release into the slip. Make sure that foot does come all the way in. You're turning from your center and shifting your weight back the other way. Oh, here's a key point I didn't mention. As you swivel, your standing leg, the one you're going into, so my left leg in this case, don't let it get lagged behind. So that foot's going to turn in, you see, it'll actually start the movement just a little bit before the rear leg. So your empty leg, it's not exactly at the same time. Your empty leg will, see that? It's only fractional, so basically do them at the same time. Don't start going like this. It's not that. The front leg is just a tiny bit ahead of the weighted leg. But this is the important part. Okay, watch this leg, the left leg. See how it's come right the way around, so my toe is back on the circle. I'll do it here, maybe you can see it a little bit better. Do it this way. Yeah, there you go. You should be able to see that on the circle there. Can you see that? No, you can't see that. Okay, I'll go back to this one. Okay, I hope you can see that line there. I'm pretty sure you can on the camera. There's the circle on the line. So we'll come back to this side. So watch how my left toe comes there, right back onto the line, you see? Do not do this. Swivel. See that? See how it's not turned in far enough, that left foot. That left foot should have come all the way in so that it's following the circle. If it gets left out here, that's when you're going to do your knee damage, because you're going to spiral your knee in, because in your head, you know you want to come to here. That's where I want to be. So your knee is going to come to there, but your foot got stuck, so it's no longer in line with the knee. So this is one of the cases where you need to make sure your toe follows your knee. So again, when I go back, it'll be the right leg I'd look at. I must make sure that front toe turns in far enough so that now when I sink into that posture, my knee is directly over that toe and I'm not going to do myself any damage. So that's a key element to be sure of, is make sure that foot comes around far enough. And the way to get that to happen is exactly what we learnt in the walking part of things, where we learnt to draw the toes up. Exactly the same principle here. So if you don't draw your toes up correctly, if you start to swivel and your weight presses into the ball of that foot, of that leg you're going into, what will happen is you'll start swiveling. If my weight goes like this towards the outside of the circle as I'm swiveling, what will happen is the weight's gone into the heel, in which case, the weight's gone into the ball of the foot, in which case it gets stuck because there's pressure on it. So you don't want pressure on the ball of the foot. So, two things to watch here. The first thing would be make sure that as you swivel, you pull your toes up, the balls of your feet. Draw them up, like so. So as you swivel, you see, and you don't place them down until you actually get there. So I've exaggerated a little bit. Pull them up, swivel across, put them down. That's kind of what you want to be doing. Not to that extent. They should be moving like they're just brushing the floor very lightly. You're not pulling them right up in the air, but just to exaggerate the principle. So draw your toes up, and then put them back down once you get there. If you put them down any earlier than that, your foot's going to get stuck and therefore your knee's going to buckle in, and this is where people think that Bagua can damage your knees. It'll only damage your knees if you do it incorrectly. This is why you should do it very softly and slowly when you're first learning. Okay, so draw the toes back. Pull your toes back towards your shins and then place them back down on the ground. So you start to place your toes once you start to squeeze the qua. There, you see? Like so. The other area, this is a common area as well, and this applies to both the inside and the outside change. Oh, in fact, that last area also applies to the inside change. It doesn't usually happen as much because it's an easier change, but same principle. If I start to change and this toe pushes down to the ground, it'll get stuck and it won't come all the way around to where it should. So it's exactly the same principle. Draw your toes up, place them back down. So they don't touch the ground again until they're facing the correct direction. Don't drag them across the ground. Pull them up, put them down. Pull them up, put them down. Same principle. Now, here's the other ploy. We don't want to swivel on the toes, because swiveling on the toes sends you backwards. Sometimes we swivel on the toes, depending on the application. So the circular walking, what we're doing here, we're always swiveling on the heels for these basic concepts. Once you get into the form, you'll see that sometimes we swivel on the toes, sometimes we swivel on the heels, dependent on the application. If I need to get away from someone, I may swivel on the toes because it moves me this way. But if I need to move into someone, I'll swivel on the heels because that keeps my intention forward and keeps my power driven forward. Power movements, you will generate more force, more connectivity with the ground, and this has recently been proven by Western science as well, so it's not just the ancient Chinese knowledge. When you're stable in the heels and you pivot and swivel from the heels, you will get more power, particularly your weighted leg. So it's not so important like something like that, that's okay, that's the unweighted leg twisting into the ground, but the stabilizing leg, that should be twisted down through the heel. But in the case of a parallel stance like this, of course, we're sinking down through both heels. If I swivel on the toes, let's say I'm trying to strike straight towards the camera. If I swivel on my toes, you see this? Can you notice that? My body moves backwards because I'm swiveling on the toes. It's moving this way. My energy's going that way. If I swivel on the heels, my energy's coming here, you see? Straight towards the camera. So it's keeping my power forward when I'm swiveling on the heels. So as I said, I'm not saying swiveling on the toes is a bad thing. It's only bad to do it without the understanding of when you should do it. If you just swivel on the toes or the heels whenever, that means you're not understanding that you should swivel on your toes for certain applications and you should swivel on the heels for certain applications. If you swivel on the toes when you're meant to be swiveling on the heels, it means your balance is incorrect. Because if I say swivel on your heels, you start swiveling, but then your weight topples forward. Therefore, your weight transfers onto the balls of your feet, and what will happen is you'll start swiveling, and then your heels will move, just on the end of the posture. This can happen in the outside change as well. So as we change across, you start to swivel, but then you fall over here, your weight goes outside the circle, so of course your weight goes onto the balls of the feet, and what happens? This kind of thing. And your heels push back. So this is what we don't want. You must lock yourself down into your heels when you swivel. There are times in the form, in the Bagua form, when we're doing the full kata, when we've taken an extra long stance. Now if I swivel on my heels, it's too long for the outside change. So if I've taken a large front stance like so, I may now swivel on my standing heel, my weighted heel, and my rear toe to swivel around, because that will bring my stance back into that normal squeezing scissor step again. So that's one of those exceptions, but that's the unweighted leg. Where my center of gravity is, I'm still grounded through the heel as I do that practice. Okay, now we're going to add the arm mechanics into the twist. So like we did with the inside changes. Okay, so with the outside change, like so, what we have to do is we have to throw your long arm, throw it over the top, you see, and that makes you move. It throws your body around, it spins your body. So you're still using your core to create this spin, but you're using your outer limb to give you a little bit more momentum in the movement. It's like when you might sort of throw your arms across to put power into a movement or something, you know? You're using one portion of your body to gain momentum in another portion of your body. So that's what we're looking at. So along with the turn we've just done, this is when we do it without the arms, we're just using the core to spin. Now, with the hands up in the position, which we've already learned how to hold the position, again we'll just go back to the number 3 hand to begin with, the classical palm. Your lower rear hand, of course, just like before, the reverse of before. So before, when we did the inside change, the front hand had to go a little bit flat to allow the top hand to come through. Now, because we're going the other way, of course, it's the bottom hand, or the rear hand, which has to flatten so that this one can go over the top of it and pass it. So, throw that hand over the top, you just let your fingers go down to a number 2 hand to let it through, like so. Throw it around. It's that long arm that gives you the momentum. You see, you go, whoop, and so, like that. You must make sure, the key element to this section is making sure your hands overlap each other, they do not move together. So just watch the hands, See? So one hand moves first, then the other. 1, 2. The separation is greater, of course, when we're first learning, as a beginner. So, I tell my students to throw the long arm across like you're trying to hit yourself in the other shoulder kind of thing, to roughly 180 degrees from the center. And then so you're halfway through the turn effectively. So throw that hand to about here, and then for the rest of the circle, the second half of the circle, you start to extend the left arm, and you come into the strike. The strike this time is, of course, a lateral movement rather than a pumping forward action. Okay, let's carry on with that before I go into this next section. So you throw one hand across, just dropping your fingers to let it through, and then let your other hand out. The feet, the body works, nothing different. You're still engaging your core to twist the body. You're just adding to it that little motion, you see? So the thing we don't want to do, of course, is this. Bringing both hands around together. That's what we don't want to do. You'll lose all your power like that. The hand that's creating the force, you want that to be as far away from the body as possible, because that'll give you more momentum to come around into the posture. The hand that's going to strike, though, if you have that hand also out, so if I throw this hand out as well, and throw both hands out, it'll slow you down. Effectively, you need to keep one hand tucked in so it's coiled, ready for when it's going to pump out. If, for example, now I could use my right hand, in this case, to help me spin, watch. But did you see where the power stopped? I'll do it again. If I do that again, I'll use this hand to create my force. My power can only generate to about here. And then once I get around to here, you see, it's just a passive movement coming into the center of the circle. So no matter how hard I use this arm to throw out, throw with my center and all of that, there's no way that I can get the force to reach the center. Because, I mean, unless it's just going to be a pushy sort of a strike. But to get a really nice snappy impact strike, when you throw your arm, that momentum will only travel to about here. And then it's just passively coming back to the center. So what we want to do is, you want to use your other arm to create that same momentum. So you use your inside arm here to create that momentum whilst this arm stays tucked. And then once I'm back around now, I can see the other side. Now I can do the second movement with the second part of the turn. And that way you're going to get power on the first half of the circle with your, we'll call that the defensive hand. And then the second half of the circle, you're going to engage the second hand. So you get two instances of force being delivered through your arms, but with one turn of the body, you see? So we're here like this, we get wah, wah, you see? Power, this power only travels to roughly about the outside of the circle, like directly out of the circle. Wah, wah. The second hand travels back to the center. Okay, so like that. Wah, wah. That's what we're looking at. So you can see now that hand, when it hits the center, you see, you're getting tremendous power. And that's fine if it goes a little bit past the center and then springs back. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not like when we're talking about the walking that we don't want to do this. That's learning about control and so on. But if you get a lot of force coming through, because it's a centrifugal type of a strike, it's not a straight, snappy sort of a strike. It's okay if it travels just past the center and then comes back to here. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. Throw the one hand over. Do it nice and slow and controlled, like so, to begin with. Throw this over, turn your left foot in. Control, still with that little squeeze of the qua, as we did earlier. Do it again. When you do it, anytime you do it, don't go like this. Remember, just like I think I said that in the open side, don't load back before doing a change. You've got to stand where you are, so I'm standing towards the camera. Initial move. You see? Straight towards my target. Not like that. That's loading. We don't want to do that. So same applies to your outside change. When we're walking the circle with the outside change, like so. Sometimes I'm dropping my hand here just because I'm looking at the screen and looking at the camera. When you're walking the circle, that front hand should be at head height. Right? So always that front hand is in front of your face as you're walking the circle. But as I say, sometimes I'm looking at the camera, so I'm instinctively just dropping that hand so I can see the camera. But yeah, try to keep your hands right up like so. Okay, so we swivel on the heels again as before, but this time it's a 1-2. So the inside change, the major difference is on the inside change, you've got a pulling and a striking. They're going in reverse actions to each other. One is drawing in, the other is pumping out. And they're both activating at the same time. I mean, okay, technically if you be very pedantic about it, the pulling hand is active just before the striking hand. But on a gross level, effectively this one pulls back as this one goes forward. Just on a very simple way of looking at it. So it's a pumping and a drawing in. The outside change, however, they're both sweeping lateral type strikes. One is of course an across your body strike, coming across here. The other then is coming out from your body like so. But the strike you see is going that way. It's not pumping forward. Later on, again in your training, remember we're only covering basics here. Later on there's a whole lot more that can come into this, so that's why of course I'll be putting out, we already have some advanced tapes produced by my father on our website which you can purchase to get some more advanced details. I will of course be putting out my own follow-up series to this on the advanced ways of doing the form as well. But we've got to work with our foundation first. As soon as you start adding extra bits on the top in your beginner, if you're a beginner in your training, as soon as you start adding extra bits, you don't get your groundwork founded properly. So it's most important to look at these lessons, your complete basic series, and really get that honed in before you move on to either my own new videos, which I'll be putting out, or the ones that are currently available on our website, taijiworld.com. For the advanced principles. Of course, if you've already been practicing Bagua for many years and you're just learning this style, of course you may be able to adapt into it much quicker than a beginner. So in which case you'd still learn this to get your grounding, but you may want to then move more quickly onto the advanced principles. But anyway, I'm only teaching the basics here on this particular series. So when we do the outside change, we're working purely with a centrifugal swinging type of action, because that's the primary body mechanic we're getting. Later on we can add into it a little bit of a strike to the front. That would be indicating like a strike to the side first, and then a strike back to the front, and so on. But I'm not going to go into details of that. So all you need to know is there is more to come, just so you don't sort of learn this and then practice that for the rest of your life thinking that's all there is to Bagua. Okay, let's get back to this. So throw that hand over. This one also, oh, I didn't say that about the inside one. You can go over the top, or you can also go underneath as well. So you can go either way. They give you a different feeling. So you can be coming with any one of the different palms. You can go over the top, so rear hand pumping over, like so. Or the rear hand can come under, like so. So it gives you a different feeling, whether you come over or under when you're doing those changes. So same thing with the outside change. When you do your outside change, you can go over like so. Or now when I swivel back the other way, I can go under. So I can take my left hand straight under my own arm. In this case, I don't need to worry about dipping this hand under. You see, it can just go straight across. However, that hand will still relax a little bit. I don't want to hold it in the yang hand because otherwise it's a bit dead when it swings around into this position. So even if you go under, there's nothing in its way, so you don't need to get the hand out of the way, but it will still relax in order to, you can't really see that, but I'll just spin the other way for you, like so. So that hand will still relax slightly, so that then when you come into the next, as you come around, you see, it'll flick into posture in the same way that we did with the driving palms on the inside change. You have a softer hand as the change is happening, and then as you express into the movement, that's when you get your palm shape and the flexing of the fingers and so on. Okay, so under or over. Utilize that opposite arm, cross it over. So I would suggest something like at least allow your long arm to cross your own wrist before that one starts traveling out. So as I said before, don't allow that hand to start moving straight away, or just like that, for example. If I just do it myself, if I see where it sort of happens naturally, yeah, I would say it's almost back to the elbow. So it's not quite. Somewhere, as I say, there's no exact pinpoint to give you here, but what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to go the other way. Okay, so I'm spinning the other way on the circle, so just assume I'm on the circle. But as this comes around, so I wouldn't want to do that. See how just the palms are crossing each other? That's not enough. It's not enough momentum from that long arm. So throw that right the way across. See how the long arm, the elbow, is at least crossing the wrist of the left arm. and then that left arm starts coming out as the other hand retracts. So that hand will actually cross the wrist, and then the long arm, which was the momentum point, will slide down, you see, and then into place. So it actually slides down through the crease of the elbow as you come into place. See, just trying to show that from a different angle so you can see. Wah, wah, like so. Okay, that's what we're going to get with that one. Okay, the last thing we need to do is just have a look at the different palms, the 8 different palms, and how you would change into them. Okay, so they're all the same body mechanics. So if I'm using the number 3, what we've already covered, throw that arm over and come back around to center. All the others are the same body mechanics. Here's number 1, throw it over, then bring the right hand over. You see, it's that sweeping action. So the intention changes in comparatively to the inside change. Obviously on the inside change is more of a jabbing action with the palm. Now we're getting more of a sweeping action, like sweeping across the eyes with the fingers or something like that. So number 2 would be exactly the same. 1, 2. Number 3 we've already covered, same thing. Number 4 would be the same again. Throw it across this way or underneath. As I say, both can go up or under. And this would be like a back palm slamming across, like so. Number 5, which would be down here, exactly the same thing. Come through here, or you can bring it underneath. Just throw it over the top, and you see again like a slamming back palm coming through here. Number 6, like so. Again, you can take it under or over, doesn't matter. So we're like so, and we take it around and come around like so. Right? So again, all the movements, of course, become more lateral rather than thrusting, as like what we did in the inside change. Number 7 palm change, same thing. Throw it over, throw it under. Body mechanics are the same. But the same thing as usual. Don't exactly hold the number 7 palm as you're doing it. You loosen your hands a little bit during the change. So you've got your number 7 palm there as you walk in the circle. As you start to change, of course, you've got to let that under so this can change. Or if it goes over, the striking hand here just becomes just a natural palm, just a more of a natural palm shape as you come across, like you're just striking with the palm or something like that. And then as you come into posture, there's the actual number 7 palm on the end of the movement, you see. The number 8 palm, that's the only one which is different right from the start. So as I say, as you get into the more advanced realms of the form, each one of those palm changes I've just covered, so far we're just doing them exactly the same, pretty much. Just swing, bang, and do a lateral motion. So we're just sticking to that basic motion. Whereas the number 8 palm, so yeah, that's what I was saying. Later on in your training, all of the 8, they do become a little bit different, but they're very subtle differences. So in the beginning, we just do that gross movement, the same for all of them. So what happens is with the number 8 palm, you do the change the same, but there's just a little extra movement on the end of the posture. And by this time, you should have practiced the other ones, of course, so you should be able to adapt this slightly more difficult movement into the posture. So we're in the number 8 palm, like so. As you do the change, you turn your hands down this time, right? So you don't hold the number 8 palm and do the change like so, because it's spiraled. Like I've said with the other ones, if we do number 1 palm, you can hold the number 1 palm and do a change, because all it's required is that you just soften it and then flex it again, just like we did with the inside. So there's a slight softening, especially of that hand. This hand flexes first, and then the left hand flexes, but the rough shape stays the same, and that's pretty much the case for all the rest of them. Something like the number 3, that's a little bit of a change, because you do have to bend the fingers down just to let the hand over the top, but generally speaking, they're roughly holding their shape. The number 8 palm, though, you can't hold this shape and come around like this, you see. You're in a very torqued position. You're not going to generate force and power doing that. So from that number 8 palm, you're going to relax that hand down to sort of, kind of like a number 3, or somewhere between a number 2 and a number 3, just like a slap coming across this way, you see. Whilst the left hand, the rear hand in this case, becomes like a number 2 hand. So think of it almost like 2 number 2 hands, you see. So they're coming around like so. But then on the end of the movement, we're going to get this. See, so there's your scoop on the end of the posture. So we swivel into the posture from here, so we relax out of it into more like two number 2 hands, and then just on the end of the posture, you see, you get the little scoop on the end of the posture. This is what we've got to get. So that actually happens after your feet have gotten around. So I'll try to do that slowly. Coming around, and then just as you get there, just as you hit the center, for example, see there's the spiral on the end of the movement. So you see, and of course the body follows that spiral. I don't just go here and then do that with my hands, you see. That's okay if you're just learning it for the very, very first time. You might just come bang and just at least understand that, you see. But see how I'm spiraling into it, at least that. I wouldn't just go bang and just turn the hands into the number 8 palms. You must at least, see that? That's a scooping dig into the posture, like so. And that motion that you're digging, see how my body's starting to follow that motion? See how as I scoop down, my body goes down slightly. If I exaggerate, like so. So that's what it looks like. Then you slip and start walking the circle again using your number 8 palm. So I'll just show that a couple more times. So number 8 palm, change it to a number 2, and dig on the last part. Okay, so I think you've got enough there to give you some good foundation basics on the circular walking, hands and feet. So keep practicing that a lot. Once we move on to the form, I would recommend moving on to the form straight away. Normally when I teach my students Bagua, I teach them the Qigong, the circle walking and the form all together. Or rather, not exactly all together. I would teach them maybe the first class, just circle walking, but then in their second class I'd give them a piece of the form, at least the first few movements of the form. Because you want to give them some movements to work with. I said earlier something about making sure your students enjoy their training. So you don't want to make it too hard on them because then they never come to class and then they don't learn anything. So you want people to actually enjoy their training, but while still being strict and making sure they're learning it correctly. However, there's another reason why you want to start learning the form while you're learning the circle walking, and that is simply because often certain principles or movements from the form can help you to understand something in the circle walking. So you might be doing a certain movement in the circle walking and you struggle, and you're just not getting it. You could take years and still not get it. But then you practice the circular form and maybe some other posture within that form, it teaches you the same principle but from a different angle. And so you might learn it better from that angle. Someone else may have learned it from the circular walking. So this applies to the form as well. Once we start into the form, don't just sit on the first palm change for weeks on end getting that perfect. As soon as you've got it kind of roughly okay, move on to the next part. Because I've always found that possibly something in the second palm or the third palm or the fourth palm might teach me how to do the first palm. So always just work through just at a medium pace. Don't rush through it, but don't sit on the first palm change for years either. But then of course when you get to the end, you go back to the start again and go over it again in even more detail with a greater understanding from having your foundation principles laid down. So we've got the circle walking down now, we've got your Qigong down now. So that's the end of lesson 3. Lesson 4 will carry on into the Bagua classical circular form. Thank you.